Remember these two videos?
No, we're working on coordination. That's why it's hard. Let's go. What you crying for? What you crying for? Why are you crying? Talk to me.
I don't feel confident in myself.
You don't feel confident in yourself? Why not? Look at me, son. Why not?
Because I keep having to do it over again.
Over and over again doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means you have to practice, son. Have I yelled at you? Have I done any of that?
Zeus! 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 Pull in, punch all the way through. When you feel the pain, go all the way through. That could be a barrier in life or anything. Punch hard. Zeus! Zeus! You gotta punch it hard enough. Punch through it. You feel pain? Shake that off. Let's go. Zeus! 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 That's what this is about. Good. Let's get to that. Why are you crying? That's what this is about, son. It's okay to cry. We cry as men. Why are you crying, though, son? Come on. Tell me, why are you crying? It's called a test for a reason, but why are you crying? Go ahead, son. Because what?
Because it is hard to do with my left hand.
Okay, good. But you did it, though. You punched him with your left hand. You know in life there's going to be things harder for you to do than other things?
Now, believe it or not, these are by the same individual, Jason Wilson. And today we're going to be talking about a book from him that I found quite interesting, and I think you guys will too as well. Something near and dear to my heart, Cry Like a Man by Jason Wilson. Alright, so one of the things I feel men face a lot and we never get to talk about is the fact that you'll go, you'll work, you'll grind, you'll do all these things all the time, and you'll always feel exhausted, tired, aggravated, stress from work, stress from home, and you're never given a chance to properly release that. And so one of the things that men face all the time, and one of the things that we face, whether it be in the first world or the third world, is that you'll go, you'll drink, you'll smoke, you'll do drugs, you'll do whatever it is to kind of release all that tension from the daily grind. And we've never been taught, oh, you can release this tension in a more productive way, in a way that isn't destructive to your families, in a way that doesn't aggravate a 70% divorce rate in the Western world, in a way that allows you to get closer to your family. And I feel like Jason Wilson's book, Cry Like a Man, details in a crisp and concise way how to really go from a man that is troubled, struggling, suffering, to a man that can properly be able to discuss and release the tension that he feels within himself in a way that is productive, in a way that is modeling for his family, for his kids. Cry Like a Man is Jason Wilson's memoir and is more of a message for people that are a bit younger than me to kind of understand and look at all the struggles that you've went through and be able to properly release from them. A bit of background on Wilson himself. He runs the Cave of Adalam Transformation Training Academy. And this is one of the premier top transformational academies for young boys, especially in the Christian faith, to be able to learn martial arts, but learn how to release tension, to learn how to release all the aggravations of regular school life, and to be able to properly come to a conclusion, come to an understanding, and come to a balance of how can I, as a young man, properly model myself for everyone around me and be productive, to help my family, to help my parents, whatever it may be, you know? And this is the most important part of this whole book. This is why for me as someone that has come through, I've always been down the beaten path. So I've always been working along this beaten path where seeing my role models become doctors, become physicians, become residents, become master's students, PhDs, whatever it may be. And seeing other people around me that Like we're both on the beaten path and they go astray. It hurts my heart. Like I'm not able to really come back and talk to my friends and like some of the friends that I've seen before and understand where they're coming from. Because I've always been on this straight and narrow. And Jason Wilson's book is kind of that opening, kind of shows a lot of what happens if you are not on that straight and narrow. What happens if your wealth, if your socioeconomic outlook is based upon where you were born. If the circumstances that you are born into are the ones that govern you. And Wilson's book kind of shows how we can utilize religion, we can utilize spirituality, we can utilize role models in order to be able to kind of pull ourselves up out of our circumstances. Jason Wilson's youth is the model that most black kids follow. You're born into a lower socioeconomic class. You are now forced to deal with the circumstances of a lower socioeconomic class. You're born into neighborhoods that usually have drug addicts, that usually have gangs. And in order to feel like part of the in-group, you join a gang. You start pushing drugs. You might get a gun. This is the kind of life and reality that a lot of black kids face. And I feel like as a black kid that hasn't really had much of that, except in various circumstances where my family is moving, we're transitioning from city to city. It's so important to have role models. It is so important to have people that you can look towards that are doing better than you. And the problem is that in most of these communities, you have role models that are doing worse than you. You have role models that are getting stuff via illegal ways. So that's all you see. And that's why this cycle, this system perpetuates drug addict after drug addict, drug dealer after drug dealer, murder after murder, gang violence after gang violence. And Jason Wilson's story is a lot of that. It's a lot of how one of his brothers started to become a drug dealer, and he was eventually murdered for it. And so he saw that, and he chose a different path. And one of his other brothers went to college. And so you have like this dichotomy of one brother that's very much like that's on the beaten path, that's trying to do better for himself in the most socially recognized way, and the other brother that thinks that it's better to go down the path of drugs, alcohol, women, promiscuity, in order to feel like he's the man. And the thing is that the latter of the two is the one that's usually socially reinforced, whether it be rap music, whether it be like MTV and all these celebrity things. We're always looking towards the rapper with the biggest diamond necklace on his chest. Another point I want to make is that most black kids, especially in the US or in Canada, are born to slaves. We are the product of generational slavery, or we're the product of recent immigration, whatever it may be. And especially the ones that are products of generational slavery, it's very difficult to get away from that trauma. Especially because that trauma is both genetic, but that trauma has its roots in things that have been passed down. It has its roots in abuse. The slave master that abuses a slave, once the slave is now freed, he'll go and abuse his kids. He'll go and abuse his wife. And that just kind of keeps going from there. And when you have this generational racism, especially in the US, lynchings and murders and trying to prevent interracial marriages and stuff like that, it adds on. Especially with black kids, it's very difficult to be able to kind of see yourself in mainstream media in a way that isn't necessarily negative. It is in a way that isn't destructive. With a lot of these kids, with a lot of their parents, with a lot of these boys especially, their fathers are not in the picture. Their fathers and their father and their mother got together once, and they got along, they got married, stuff like that, and then they divorced. And this is primarily due to the fact is that most black men don't know how to really treat their family. Plus they don't understand how to release all the aggravations of real life, of the real world. And that release eventually comes in alcohol. lots of alcoholism, not just in the black community, but also in the white community. When you're in a lower socioeconomic class, when you are stressed all the time, when your wife, who might be at home all the time, doesn't really understand the stresses of outside, it compounds. It's a struggle. And men, us men, we don't really know how to be able to communicate that with our families. You know, another important point that really begs discussion is around the African community's desire to really, I think it's more like dominate women. Let's call it that. Wilson discusses his family's reaction to him still being a virgin at the age of 13 or 14. And he retells, thunderous laughter echoed throughout the house, followed by what had to be the single most humiliating experience of my life. And this one experience of being humiliated, of not being enough of a man, led him down the road of promiscuity and seeing women as nothing more than just objects to have a good time with. And for marriage and, wanting to have kids and stuff like that, this is the one attitude you can never have. Now you might be wondering, how did Wilson get out of this kind of vicious cycle of being born to generational slaves, having all this baggage with you, parents, family having these certain schemas, these certain scripts of how a man should be, of how a man should act, of being a man involving a lot of promiscuity and stuff like that. How do you get out of this? But Wilson found his stride, particularly through the Christian faith. And he kind of discusses how this Christian faith of his, this faith in God being the father of the house, not necessarily being the father he never had, being the father that replaces and kind of heals the father wound when his biological father left him. He kind of describes how God took that position within his life. By understanding religion, by learning about religion, he was able to kind of release a lot of the tension and the anger and the suffering and the schemas and all of the toxic masculinity he got from his original father, and be able to really project something that his son will now be able to use in a constructive manner. Now, so Wilson excellently encapsulates the idea that for a man to truly be a man, to be the comprehensive being that is supposed to hold up and support the family unit, the one that is supposed to lead from the front and to take care of the back at the same time, he needs the capacity to be able to cry, to be able to release the emotional trauma that he's burdened with on a day-to-day basis, whether that be trauma or emotions from home, or whether that be emotions from work. He needs the capacity, he needs the space to be able to release a lot of his stresses. Now, women have that capacity. It's ingrained. It's something that they don't really talk about very much. But for men, it is something that we struggle with deeply. We struggle to be able to open ourselves up. For decades, I thought power was based on how much weight you could lift and how many men you could knock out. Now I realize anyone untrained can lift a dumbbell or break a jaw. But real power is when a man can navigate through the pressures of this world without succumbing to his negative emotions. And man, this hit me. As someone that goes to the gym, wanting to be strong, wanting to look buff, wanting to look like this, someone that is getting into martial arts and trying to learn how to wrestle, trying to learn how to strike. A lot of it is more a mental game than it is a physical game. You're training your mental toughness and stuff like that. But if you lack the capacity, the ability of taking that mental toughness, that mental fortitude, and being able to transfer that mental fortitude to your life, which a lot of us men fail to do, that is where we get caught up in. That is where the struggles and the problems come from. And that mental fortitude primarily lies within the ability to, number one, process our emotions, but number two, be able to release those emotions. So what does this all mean? A real man embraces his emotions and his feelings. He takes responsibility for his actions, and he loves, cares, and nurtures his family. He is a committed spouse, and he's present with his children. And a real man seeks healing in wholeness, especially from whatever past traumas he might have faced. But functionally, how does this work? And I think most of this idea comes from, being able to really think about getting a support group, especially a support group where you can talk about your emotions. And for me, that support group really relies upon being able to talk to some of my closest friends, but also being able to talk to my future wife, my fiance, and being able to discuss with her things. And like, we've come to this agreement, to this understanding about honesty and openness. If she says I look fat, I look fat. She's not going to be like, oh, you look a little chubby or something like that. No, you look fat. And we kind of have this kind of understanding that if it needs to be said frank, say it frank. Or I'm not going to necessarily get angry at her. I might get angry at her in the moment, but I definitely know where that love and that honesty is coming from. And she knows where that is coming from as well. If you guys like this content, number 1, get this book, Cry Like a Man, by Jason Wilson. Number 2, please smash that like button. And number 3, subscribe for more. Please put a comment down below of what other books you think I should review, and I'll definitely get to them as quickly as I can. And until next time, my friends, take care. Peace.